Yeah, so why don't we get started, Johanna? So again, guys, welcome to the webinar. Presentitude is going to give us an overview of quick strategies to create better slide decks. My name is Jay Pugliese. I work for Empower, which is an add-in for Microsoft Office. And Johanna is my presentation PowerPoint expert, and I always enjoy these webinars and look forward to these opportunities to connect. So this whole webinar will run about 30 minutes or so, and then at the end, we will field any of your questions. So please put those into the chat and we will respond and answer those questions. And at the end of this, sure, if you guys are going to take notes, it's great, but we're going to send you a recording along with Johanna's contact information so you guys could also connect as well. So for the purposes of time, let me introduce Johanna. Johanna, thank you for hosting this amazing opportunity, and please welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. I'm so excited to get to hang out with you today and again talk about my favorite subject, PowerPoint. And that's what we're going to do for the next 30 or so minutes. So I can't see you right now. I don't know where you're calling in from. As Jason said, I'm on the West Coast. I'm based out of Sacramento in California, but I'm originally from Sweden. That's my accent. If I could see you all, I would ask if you had any formal PowerPoint training, raise your hands, and I would most likely see few to none hands in the air. And yet you all work in PowerPoint every single day. So I'm so happy that you're here to let me share some of my quick strategies to create better slide decks. Another thing that I don't know about you is your level of knowledge of PowerPoint. Are you a complete newbie to the magic world of PowerPoint, or are you a super user with all the tabs and commands ingrained in your brain? This session is geared towards regular users, I would say, who wants to improve their slide design using the built-in tools inside of PowerPoint. You'll probably know your way around basic PowerPoint, but you want and need to learn more. I'm going to be using screenshots from the PC PowerPoint interface today, but the latest versions of Mac and PC, they look pretty much identical, and mostly the two versions work the exact same way. And when there are differences, I'm going to point them out. You will get, as Jason mentioned, a handout from today's session with all the details of what I shared, so you can sit back, relax as we dive into the magic world of PowerPoint. We are going to start talking about taking control of your content, the key layout solutions you can use when creating slides, and the building blocks we have available to work with. Then we are going to talk about how you can use these three aspects when you do smart starts with smart art, use your text as visual elements, and let the shapes do the work. But first, we're going to talk about the content on your slides. Before you can even start thinking about creating better slides, you have to take control of your content. The slide sample I'll be using for us today actually comes from the analog world. When I'm not nerding out in PowerPoint, I'm a stationary nerd. I plan my days, my projects, and I take my notes by hand. So to give ourselves a break from everyday business content on our slides, we're going to use content from the analog world today for slide design. If you're curious about what this planner is, it's a Hobonichi cousin. It's using Tomoe River paper. It's a Japanese planner, and I just love it. So let's dive in. Our first step to get to the slide design aspects is to take control of the content. And although all of this content is describing the important benefits of using a paper planner, we really need to control it and rein it in. Of course, this is a comparatively easy slide to work with. It is just a lot of text. In the real world, this could also contain tables and charts and other things. But to make it an easier example, we're going to use a text-intense slide for today. Controlling content means making it more optimized for a slide. In this case, we can actually cut the supporting text sentences and keep just the primary parts to shorten it down a little bit. This will give us something more workable. Although the content is no longer covering the whole slide, these are still full sentences. So let's see what the primary focus for each of these sentences might be. If we highlight the most important parts, it's a little easier to digest these sentences. The main parts are the benefits of using a paper planning is that it enhances focus by minimizing digital distractions, it improves memory retention, and it provides a tactile, customizable experience. If we keep just the essential parts, this is what's left of that original slide. So now we're down to a really slim version. Now, we don't always have the luxury to be able to take full control of the content before we go into slide design. Sometimes all the content has to stay and we're creating a slide document really. And we can absolutely do that and utilize the tools in PowerPoint to turn dense, bulleted slides into good-looking documents by using the notes pages, for example, in PowerPoint. But that's not the topic today, so we're going to leave that aspect behind. We are going to use the more wordy version and the slimmed down version as our main starting points today. In the best of worlds, the slim slide is the one we will create for effective and engaging presentations, but that's not always the reality in the corporate world, so we're going to keep both variants for now. But before we dive into ways to create better slides out of these two samples, let's talk about some layout options we always have available to make better slides. I like to think of key layout solutions as 4 different starting options. If you want to dive even more into different options on how to break out text-heavy slides, I would highly recommend checking out Nolan Haim's Better Deck, which will give you 52 different alternatives to bulleted slides. You can find his card deck on his website, nolanhaimscreated.com, and I'm going to share that link in the handout for you. I use 4 types of layout structures as starting point for when I'm deciding slides. A text-heavy slide can in essence be broken up by dividing the content horizontally or using a grid, or by framing the content, or finally just splitting it up. These are 4 approaches I always use with slides that I'm working on. Let's go through some examples of these. Let's see how we can use a horizontal content approach. Content can be divided horizontally. This is probably one of the easiest and fastest way to break up slide content. Depending on the amount of text your content have on the content you have on your slide, you can have many or few horizontal chunks. You can add visuals to your horizontal chunks, or you can chunk up only parts of your slide to lighten up the heavy text. The horizontal chunks can be small, or they can be big chunks. Adding grids and grid chunking is a second layout approach. Splitting things up into multiple grids or adding visuals can break up text-heavy slides. Using a table with custom borders is a quick way to create grids where all the content will stay in its respective cells, regardless how the table might be resized on the slide. Creating big chunks of the content using visuals is also always an option. However, the second you need to add images, stock photos, or icons, you have to spend dedicated time to find the optimal images that can be pretty time-consuming. A third option is to split the content into frames using your brand colors. Dividing the slides into 1/3 or halves, or adding a framed sidebar can break up the text. A horizontal frame or framing part of your content can also divide and emphasize your content better on the slide. However, a quick way to really split up heavy content on your slide is to actually split them up into different slides. Slides are free. You can use as many as you want. 1 sentence on a slide is better than 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences. So the fourth approach is to split your content on multiple slides. You can also set a subheader as a starting slide and then add supporting slides with more content next to it. Now let's take a look at what these 4 different layout options at a very basic level could look like for content. We're going to use this text-heavy slide on benefits of using pen and paper for notes as our example. First out, basic horizontal content. Taking bullets and framing them horizontally is a quick way to break up content on a slide. It's still a lot of text, but it's more visual. It doesn't feel as intensive as it did before. The second option, basic grid chunking. Putting your content on a grid, like in this example using a quadrant, can also be a way to make text-heavy slides more approachable. The third option is basic framing of content. Adding some kind of a frame to divide the slides up in different parts will also help break up long sentences. And the fourth option is to split up content to multiple slides. Maybe the headline is the first slide and each of the individual bullets will be 1 slide each. Now, none of these examples really had any other design aspects to them than just splitting the text content, But thinking in terms of these layouts is a good starting point for what you can do with your content when you're designing slides. Now, what building blocks do you have available when you're starting to build your slides after you have a layout in mind? We have 8 different building blocks to work with. PowerPoint have them kind of built into the program in your menus and tabs. You can add images from the Microsoft Stock Photography Library, of course, from your own corporate library as well. If you are an Empower user, you even have a direct link on the Empower tab to your corporate images and other assets. There are icons built into PowerPoint these days, or you can use your external icons or the icons from the Empower icon library if you are an Empower user. You can always use text as a building block or use shapes to frame and split your content. Tables are a great way to organize content that needs to be flexible. SmartArt is PowerPoint's built-in design tool with preset templates for splitting content. You can use charts, bar charts, or pie charts or other charts to split and visualize your content. And you can use color to contrast or visualize. We don't really have the time to focus on all of these today, so we are going to talk specifically about these 3, using SmartArt, using text, and using shapes. And that concludes the first part of today, controlling the content, the layout options, and the building blocks that we have available. So let's use these as we move over to our 3 different strategies to create visual slides, starting with being smart with SmartArt. SmartArt has actually been built into PowerPoint since PowerPoint 2007. It was added to help users create visual diagrams and illustrations. It includes a number of various styles and layouts. However, nothing has really been improved over the last 15 years when it comes to SmartArt. And the options are kind of clunky and not always easy to use, and some of them are just plain looking not very good. But you can use SmartArt to function as a smart start when you are working on your slides, and can be a great way to split out your content and build your slides. Let's take a look at how. The SmartArt functionality is available on the Insert tab. When you hit SmartArt, you're going to get an option to choose SmartArt. There are 8 different categories: list, processes, cycle, hierarchy, relationships, matrix, pyramid, and picture. Some of these SmartArt graphics are, let's say, more useful than a lot of the others, but all of them can be used as a starting point for when you're creating your slides. So how do you quickly use SmartArt as a smart start to create a visual slide? The first step is to select the content you want to convert. You right-click and you choose Convert to SmartArt. You can choose from the sample list that opens up or use the More SmartArt graphics. For this example, we're going to use the horizontal bullet list to quickly move the content from the placeholder into containers that we can format. This is a SmartArt called horizontal bullet list that we just converted our text into. In our case, we only had 1 level of text levels. We didn't have second or third levels and so on and so forth. But this particular SmartArt comes with a second level automatically set, as indicated by the current empty light blue boxes. That's why those are there, but our text are now nicely placed into these shapes. As with any SmartArt, you can edit the text inside of the shapes directly or in the text pane on the side that opens up when you select a SmartArt. Using the text pane is actually very efficient. Here you can demote or promote text using tab or shift tab, moving the text to separate shapes and really organize your content. But how can we use this as a starting point for something that we want to create? When the SmartArt is selected, the SmartArt tab will open. All the way to the right, you find the Convert button, and here you can choose Convert to Shapes. You can do the same thing by using your keyboard, using Control, Shift, and G to activate the Ungroup command. That's going to ungroup the SmartArt. Same thing as the Convert to Shape. This is going to turn all the shapes in the SmartArt into individual shapes, and they are no longer part of that SmartArt configuration. We can now remove the shapes we're not using, in this example, the light blue empty boxes. We can make them a little bit bigger. They were kind of small, so we just select them all and make the shapes larger. We can Make sure that they are left aligned. Centered text is usually really tricky to read, especially if you have full sentences, as we still have in this case. So we're going to make the text left aligned using the paragraph settings on the Home tab. Also on the Home tab in the paragraph group is the Align Text button, and we are going to change the text to be top aligned and not aligned in the middle. The text in the text boxes felt a bit tight, so I also increased the space around the text padding. That is done by choosing the shapes and right-click and choosing the Format Shape command. This is going to open up the Format Shape pane, and in the Shape Options tab in the Size and Properties group, down in the text box area, this is where you will find that text box padding settings. I increased this to 0.3 to give the text some more space inside of those boxes. I use this padding functionality a lot when I design slides to make sure there's enough space between the text and the shape that the text is inside. Once again, this is how you open the very useful Shape Format pane. You right-click, choose Format Shape, and then you can start exploring the menus. And after making the text a bit larger, this could potentially be our slide. This only takes a minute or two once you know where you find those tools inside of PowerPoint. If you have some more time, maybe you can add some numbers, or maybe even recolor your shapes and have those numbers indicate the 3 benefits of using a paper planner. If you have even more time, maybe you can find some icons that will go with your content. And this is still a lot of text here, so maybe we'll use some color and contrast to contrast the main points. It's going to break up the text a little bit. Once your text is inside of shapes, it's really easy to add more building blocks to your slide, like this, in this case, a background image. Maybe we're going to add some transparency to the shapes. If you have the opportunity to control the content more by removing even more text, it's going to make it into a more visual slide, and you can talk to the main primary points of using a paper planner. All of this started with turning our text-heavy slide into shapes using SmartArt. Another option we have when we are designing slides is to use the text itself as visuals, and that brings us to the next strategy. Turning text into visuals. Finding good images or the perfect icon is very time-consuming. You always have the option to use your text and turn that one into visuals. Going back to our sample slide of the day, we're going to see how we can take the text itself and turn it into visuals, as well as utilizing the layout principles. If this is a presentation slide where the presenter is present, we can rethink the headline and maybe remove it. I can talk to the fact that I'm going to be bringing up some of the benefits of using a paper planner. I don't necessarily need a headline here. And I'm going to use the split content layout option. I'm going to split this content into 3 parts where each sentence gets its own slide. Slides, again, they're free. You can use as many as you want. Removing all the other sentences, we now have this text to work with. The first step to do something like this is to break up the text in different text boxes. Although you don't have to do this, it usually gives you more freedom on how to treat each text part on the slide. Now, when you have the text in your text boxes, you can easily apply different treatments to each of them and control the spacing between the text boxes. The tools you need to create all this text box design can be found in the Home tab. This is where you can control the sentence case, as well as the line spacing, and most important of all, the alignment tools to make sure all your text boxes with different parts of your original sentence is aligned properly. These menus, I will say, looks a little bit different on the Mac, but the same functionality is available in the Mac interface, although it doesn't look exactly like this. Applying the same treatment to the other slides, you get a slide set by using typography as your main design building block, or jumbo text on your slides. It is still a lot of text, but using this jumbo text approach and splitting it up, these text-heavy slides are now more visual in themselves. Jumbo text works great with full bleed image backgrounds. You have to choose the right images to make sure that the text is still readable and have contrast. But this is an easy thing to do, again, starting with approaching the slide using one of the layout options. Using text and text boxes, that's one way of creating slides. And we are ready to move over to our third strategy today, using shapes. But before we do, a bonus tips of working with text is to rethink that headline. We actually might be able to ditch it. So let's talk a little bit about headlines. We already explored removing the headline from the slide in our sample with jumbo text across multiple slides. And although you should, of course, always follow your corporate template guidelines, there are times when you actually can use the title as your visual element on your slide, or sometimes remove it altogether. So let's take a look at how we can use the headline as a visual element, or when we can actually ditch it. Most slide layouts in a template comes with a title placeholder for a potential headline. But just because there is a title placeholder on your slide doesn't mean that you have to fill it out. The same thing goes for just because your content placeholder has bullets doesn't mean you have to keep them if the content you have is not really lists. For text-intensive slides such as this with a lot of content, the text lines are very long to read across the slides. Compare this to anything else that you would read. Newspaper have small columns, books have a vertical rectangular shapes, but somehow long text lines on a slide is the default settings. It's mind-boggling. One quick thing you can do when you have text-intense slides that you can remove the content of is to shorten the length of the text and the headline by making the title placeholder more vertical and shorten the width of the text box. Since this is not really a list, it's full sentences, we don't really need the bullets if there is sufficient paragraph spacing between the sentences. Now we can easily utilize that frame content layout option and frame the headline to break up the slide, or we could potentially frame the content on the right-hand side. Framing is, of course, an option only if your corporate template design allows for it. We want to make sure that you're not covering any logos or graphical brand elements and make sure all compliance footers are still visible. But if you have an option, this could be your way to handle this text-intensive slide. We still have the same amount of text on it, but it's just divided and split up a little bit to make it more visually appealing. There's still a lot of text. We can make sure that we use contrast to highlight the most important parts. So daring to move the position of the headline is actually a quick way to shift things on your slides. If the slides that you're creating will be used as part of a presentation where you or the speaker that you're creating the slides for is actually presenting the slides, you are your presentation and the slides are only there to support you as a speaker. And this really opens up to reconsider if you actually even really need that headline. You can introduce the topic by verbally stating that you are going to talk about the benefits of using a paper planner. It doesn't have to be part of the slide itself. And if the slides are to be used for presentation, you really should control the content more if you have that option. These are still full sentences on your slides. So let's break it down one more step here, and let's see what we can do with the content slimmed down even more and with the headline removed. Now we have 3 more manageable chunks of text that we can work with. Let's see what we can do with this. Once you remove the title, you have new opportunities on how to use shapes on your slides. And this is actually a pretty easy slide to create. It's 3 rectangles with 3 rounded corner rectangles on top merged together with a shadow behind. This is actually a slide template you get as part of your Empower customization if you are an Empower client. Instead of having a headline, the tabs are kind of indicating that these are the benefits, benefit 1, benefit 2, benefit 3. You can even animate them as part by part and talk to each of these benefits as you go through them with your audience. Okay, what else can we do with this slide when we remove the headline? Maybe we will add some jumbo text here to indicate the 3 benefits with 3 big, large numbers and using contrast again to indicate the main points. Maybe we can bring in an image here, a graphic. This is actually a graphic from the Empower Slides collection. We still have a lot of text here, and we want to make sure that this is a more visual slide, so we should really control the content again. So we're going to remove the secondary text and just keep that primary text there. The challenge is, of course, with this one, which is a very, very visual slide, but this slide now is no longer a standalone slide for anyone who was missing the meeting when you were presenting this or the seminar and just get this handout. They don't know what this is about. So if this slide needs to to stand alone without the presenter talking to it, that original text is important. So how do you combine them? Well, this is where creating a separate handout will be your chosen course of action. You can actually do this in PowerPoint using the formatting on the notes pages that goes together with every slide on your in your PowerPoint interface, but that is a separate session in itself, so we are not going to cover that today. But having a visual slide and a detailed handout would be the way to go if you are able to control your content and break it down as much as we did on this slide. And this also feeds back to what we talked about in the beginning when we talked about controlling the content. The slide on the left shows a sample of what the slim side could look like, and the document on the right shows that original bulleted slide as a true and formatted document. Okay, so after that little detour of daring you to ditch the headline, we can move over to the last part of today, using shapes. Shapes are, of course, the main go-to when it comes to creating visual slides. We are going to see how we can let the shapes do the work for us. On your Insert tab in the Illustrations group, you're going to find the drop-down menu for all the available shapes. This menu looks a little bit different on a Mac. I actually think it looks better on the Mac. The contrast and spacing works way better than the PC one. The shapes are organized in different groups. Unfortunately, this menu hasn't really been developed since, well, the beginning of PowerPoint times. And a lot of these shapes aren't really that useful. So I'm going to show you my go-to shapes for slide designs and where to find them in this kind of cluttered interface here. I'm going to try to tune out the clutter of the multitude of shapes they give you. Here are my go-to shapes: the rectangle, the rounded corner, top rounded corners, oval, the arrow pentagon, document, the terminator, and the off-page connector. When you insert a shape from the Insert tab in PowerPoint, it's going to be filled with most likely your accent 1 color from the current file's theme colors, and it's going to have an outline. All of this can, of course, be changed by you, and the shapes can really be turned into different looking graphic elements to host your content. Using settings such as outline and shadow or gradient outlines will immediately create a nice shape you can use for your content. You can change the fill color or fill the shape with a picture fill or a gradient fill. And since a couple of years, you also have the option to add a sketched outline to your shapes, or you can use something like the traditional dotted line outline. How do you change the design of a shape? Well, when you select a shape, the Shape Format tab will open up. The Format tab will give you some options, but most of the detailed options you want is going to be found in the Format Shape pane. To get to the Format Shape pane, you have to select an object, right-click, and scroll down to Format Shape. If you selected an image, this option will change to Format Image, so the specific wording will differ depending on what you chose. And the Format Shape pane that opens up on the right, you will get access to different options in the Fill and Line and Shape menus. And this is where you will find that sketched outline, for example. By combining shapes, you can break up your content in different visual ways. But what if you change your mind on the shape you chose? You decided on the shape, use the Format Shape to create the appearance, like the fill color and the outline, but you don't like the type of shape anymore. You can always change a shape without having to reinsert it as a new, different shape. When you've selected a shape on the Shape Format tab, in the Insert Shapes group on the left-hand side of the tab, you will find the Edit Shape button. This will give you an option to either change the shape or edit the points of a shape to change its appearance. If you choose Change Shapes, it will open up the Shape menu and you can now decide on a different shape you want and select it. So let's say that we want to change this off-page connector shape to a Terminator, the rectangular shape with fixed rounded corners. We're going to select the shape, go to the Shape Format tab, click on Edit Shapes, choose Change Shape, and then pick the new shape, in this case, the Terminator shape. The updated shape will retain the original settings of the shape. Any shadows, gradient fills, outlines, etc. will remain, as will the height and width of the shape. So if you want to change from one to the other, this is your way to do it. So going back to our use of smart art as a smart start, this really comes in handy. The actual shapes of the smart art layout option that you've chosen to move your text into doesn't really matter. The shapes can always change into something else using this technique. Going back to our previous example where we had used the smart art layout, the horizontal bullet list, which uses regular rectangles, it gave us these, regular rectangles, nothing fancy, nothing special. Selecting the shapes we want to shape, and on the Shape Format tab, Insert Shapes group, Edit Shapes, we can now change the selected shapes to whatever we want. We can change multiple shapes at the same time. So maybe we actually want to use the hexagon shapes to make this a little bit more visual. When you change a shape, as mentioned, it will retain the original sizing you had as well as any other formatting. So in order to get these to actually look like hexagons, we have to quickly resize the shapes. This is way better. Now we can start moving the shapes around. Maybe we'll cluster them together like this. And although the original smart art we chose to quickly move the text from the placeholder into individual shapes didn't use hexagons, a couple of clicks later, we now have our text in those new shapes. So whatever smart art you choose to do this, using the change shape function, you can always turn it into something else. It's still a lot of text here. This is an opportunity to really control that content even more. And turn it into something like this. The main point of the content remains in the shapes, to which we now have added a gradient fill. This is a slide we can have on the screen as we talk through the different benefits of using a paper planner. We started with that text-heavy slide, and we moved it all the way into something like this. And that concludes the last part of our session today, letting the shapes do the work. We talked about the importance of controlling the content when you have a chance, the 4 main key layout solutions: chunk your content horizontally, use a grid, frame your content, or split it up across multiple slides. We mentioned the 8 building blocks: images, icons, text, shapes, tables, smart art, charts, and colors, focusing on shapes, text, and smart art. We talked about using smart art as a smart start and using your text as a visual element. And we ended with utilizing shapes as to break up your content. I hope that this gave you some inspiration on how you can strategize your next slide deck design.
Thanks, Johanna. That's very helpful. So it looks as though we got a couple of questions in the chat, and I would just encourage you guys, just if you have any questions, feel free to post them now, and certainly we can address those. But why don't we just take the first one, and it is a smart art question for you, Johanna. They say, I like the idea with the smart art, but can you just create the shapes directly without having to apply the smart art?
You can absolutely do that. As we talked about in the last part, you can create the shapes yourself by going to the Insert tab, insert a shape, and then type your content into the shapes. That is, of course, always, an option for you. I like to save myself some time by using the smart art. If I get a text-heavy slide like I just showed you the example of, and I quickly want to break it up, I just use that smart art shortcut to bring my content into different shapes. But if you have another idea already, you have that in your mind, you can go to the Insert tab and insert those hexagons and then type in the text into the shapes directly. That works equally well. The smart art is just a way to kind of bypass your way into those shapes. I will also say that although I did promote smart art here because I do think it's a great tool to get yourself to better looking slides, it really should be seen as a smart start. A lot of the smart art models or diagrams that you have built in, they are kind of clunky, and you might have noticed that when you have a lot of text in them, they don't really work well. You don't control the movement of the shapes, and they come with some weird outlines and things like that. So smart art should really only be used as a smart start, as we talked about, and avoid using them as an endpoint. Always take them one step further to make your slides look better. it will be you can immediately identify when someone has used one of those clunky Microsoft Smart Art. But as a Smart Art, they're great. But yes, to answer your question, you can absolutely not touch Smart Art at all. Use your shapes and insert your text into them by copying, pasting, or typing it directly into the shapes.
Perfect. Question number 2, is there a way to make the format shape sidebar stay open? It keeps closing when they try to use it.
So this is, I think, one of the most annoying features of PowerPoint, that for some reason you can't really stick it and to keep it open, especially the format shape pane. If you are familiar with doing things like animations or the selection pane, those tabs stay open. They stay there until you actively close them down yourself. For some reason, the format shape pane seems to be considered a contextual pane. So it's only going to stay open for so long. And then when you continue doing something else that doesn't have to do with the format shape pane, it's going to close. And it's very annoying, and there's really no way around it. But remembering and kind of building that muscle memory in to right click, go down to the format shape pane and having that open up. You have a lot of functionality on the format shape tab, of course. And if you are an Empower user, you know, of course, that you have a lot of those tools bars set into your Empower tab. But there's really no way to get it to stick in that sense, unfortunately. You just have to remember, I have put a shortcut to my format shape on my quick access toolbar to be able to get to it quickly over and over and over again, so that I can use the shortcuts to get to there. But yeah, so the answer is really no, you can't. You just have to remember to reopen it again when you need it, because there are a lot of great tools that you can find in that format shape sidebar in terms of shadows and fills and outlines, and you know, we talked about the text padding and things like that you can't get to any other way but opening up that pane. So unfortunately, you just have to remember how to open it again.
And the last question as of right now is, can Copilot create these types of slides?
So yes and no. The way that Copilot will try to create the slides for you, it's in 2 ways. You know, you have Designer built into your PowerPoint. That is regardless of if you have Copilot added on or not. And a lot of organizations don't have Copilot activated as of yet due to all kinds of security questions and issues and things like that. But Designer, which is the, you know, the pane that opens up when you try to create a slide, and it's going to, you know, present you with some design ideas, or you might have turned that off. It depends on a local setting if you have it turned off, but usually it's defaulted to opening up. It can do some things for you for sure. It can, Designer that is built into PowerPoint can give you some ideas on what to do. I find that Designer is not really good at splitting my text up into different pieces like we just did with the Smart Art. It seems to retain the text in one placeholder, in one container, and then give some, you know, ideas around that in terms of bringing in an image or a graphic or things like that. Copilot, of course, is another thing. Copilot can understand that these are different paragraphs and can do it a little bit better. And going forward, of course, these tools will be even better. At the end of the day, Copilot and Designer could be seen as a Smart Art. It's you know, a good you know, intern that you have to help you out to get a starting point, and then you will most likely have to go in and tweak it to where you want it to be. Now, one thing that Copilot really can help you out with, if you have Copilot or any of the other tools out there as well, is to do the shortening of the text like I did here. If you want to save some time with, you know, what is the main points of this slide with all this text, that's an easy thing to pull out, not having to, you know, spend the time of going through that yourself. But for slide design, it's still a little bit clunky. So you could see it as a smart start, just like you have Smart Art to create. But yeah, it's better. Designer is better to create a, you know, an idea of a layout, but not necessarily splitting your content up. And that's where the Smart Art technique comes in handy.
Right. Great stuff. Well, thank you for those who sent in their questions. For anybody else, if you do have questions, by all means, take a look at the screen and be sure to ask your questions to Johanna directly. Again, we will be sending out this webinar, so you will have it, the information there. But as always, thanks, Johanna, so much for all of the particulars and the details. I got to tell you, I think my favorite box is the Terminator box.
I know, right? Yep.
But thank you so much, everyone, for attending this webinar, and we will follow up with an email. And thanks again for participation, Johanna. Thank you.
Thank you.